Hi, Dr. Hardy.
How
Thanks.
are you doing, Joey?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing very well. Very well. It's been a good morning and glad to be on your program, on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you for accepting our invitation to share your knowledge and wisdom with our audience here in the Philippines. Anyway, we've heard JJ enumerate the long line of qualifications that you have, but can you tell us briefly what you do now or what keeps you busy?
I do a lot of consulting. In fact, I just had a meeting this morning consulting with the board of directors about an issue they were having. So most of my work is in the nonprofit sector, but I talk about leadership. And so that crosses over into the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector. And I actually started out in the for-profit sector. I ran jewelry stores
Oh,
for 8 years. And a lot of people don't know that I'm a certified diamondologist and a guild gemologist. And I also, of course, have my master's and PhD in philanthropic studies from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And I also ran a private foundation for 7 years and have been with nonprofits and for-profits all my life. So I came late to teaching, and so I came with a lot of practical knowledge. And I think my students like that. So part of what I'm talking about is based on research. Part of it's just based on experience and knowledge in the field.
wow, that's quite impressive. So, anyway, you have this leadership approach called sharing fire. What does it mean?
Well, sharing fire is taken from an old Greek myth, the myth of Prometheus. And because I come out of the study of philanthropy, the myth of Prometheus is the first time the word philanthropy is used. It's where the origin of the word philanthropy comes from. And so sharing fire is a philanthropic approach to leadership. And what I mean by that, in the myth of Prometheus, as legend has it, Prometheus created the human race. And he created art, and he created culture, and he created all good things in our life. And he loved the mortals because it was his creation. But and he was a titan. Zeus, however, who was the main god, didn't like the mortals because they were imperfect and they made mistakes and they were silly and he was kind of disgusted with them, and he decided that he wanted to eliminate the human race and start all over. So he decided to take their fire away from them so that they couldn't cook food, so they couldn't make hunting weapons, so they couldn't make pottery, so they couldn't get warm and they would freeze to death, so they couldn't see at night. Everything associated with fire, he thought if he took the fire away from them, they would all perish eventually. And so he hid the fire on Mount Olympus. And when Prometheus found out, he went back to Mount Olympus and grabbed the fire and shared it back with the mortals so that they could not only survive, but they could thrive. They could make their pottery. They could make weapons. They could make machinery, so on and so forth. They could make tools to farm, so on and so forth, and they could stay warm. And Zeus was absolutely incredibly angry over this. And the rest, in Greek mythology, they had many gods. And all the other gods were laughing at Prometheus because he loved the mortals. And they thought that was the silliest thing they'd ever heard of. And they made fun of him. And they called him a philanthropos tropos, which is a being who loves human beings. And the act of sharing fire with the mortals so that they could survive and thrive was called an act of philanthropia. And philanthropia is now what we call philanthropy.
Yeah.
And so in the origin of the story of philanthropy, it was never about money. When we think about philanthropy, we think about wealthy people giving
Right.
money to causes, so on and so forth. But philanthropy was never about that at the beginning. It's kind of evolved into that. What philanthropy really is is it's giving people the tools to create a better life. So if you look at the myth of Prometheus, what he did was he gave the mortals fire so they could use that to create a better life. So my approach to leadership is called sharing fire, because it's about us as leaders giving people who follow us and giving people who we are colleagues with, giving everyone in our life the tools to create a better life, whether that's through education, support, encouragement, advancement, whatever it takes. And sometimes that's money, but the fact is that the biggest influence we have in our life is not money, it's people.
Right.
And I know you're a big Tony Robbins fan, and you know the influence he's had on people's lives. And people will tell you, that this, if it wasn't for this person, I wouldn't be the person I am today, or if it wasn't for that person. And so what I ask people to do when we're doing leadership programs is I ask them to identify one person who they could point to, and there may be more than one, but just identify one that you can point to and say, if it wasn't for that person, I would not be the person I am today. They have had such a positive influence on my life. Preferably, I like it to be someone who is not a parent, because I think parents do that anyway. But this is an act of philanthropy on the part of someone else.
Wow, I've never heard this concept before. This is a totally different perspective of what philanthropy is, and it totally makes sense, especially the part when you said that us making a difference in someone else's life is already a philanthropic act.